"Tell me about you," she said when she'd swallowed. "Are you happy to be back with the Condors?" "I'm happy to be healthy," he said. "And yeah, sure, happy to be back." He shrugged. "I'd had a few injuries, but I felt like I had a lot to contribute. I was glad to sign with the Condors, and I felt awful that I ended up out right at the start of this season." She eyed him, her insides tightening. "You're okay? After—" She couldn't even say it. It had been a devastating injury. "You knew about it." "Who didn't?" She feigned casualness. "The whole hockey world was worried about you." "Yeah, but I'm good. I feel really good." "You look really good." Whoops. She'd almost said that out loud. She'd all but drooled when she studied his body. He was more muscular than he'd been at 19, but even then he'd been totally ripped. "No wife?" she asked casually. "No kids?" "Nope." "Girlfriend?" He grinned and leaned forward. "Nope. I'm all yours." Addie couldn't say anything because her tongue was tied into about 1,000,000 knots. She could barely think. The two men she had always loved stood before her, larger than life. Her heart stopped, then knocked so hard against her chest she was sure the guys could hear it. She had been so worried something had happened to them, that they hadn't made it out of Afghanistan. She had tried not to think about why they hadn't called, written, or emailed. Sean looked the same, although there were a few lines around his eyes. His gorgeous, blue lagoon eyes sparkled when he pulled off his sunglasses. With his dark blonde hair and his Nordic nose, he always reminded her of a Viking. He had a wicked sense of humor that matched hers. Drew was almost the same as before. He had always been the more serious of the two guys, but now there seemed to be something a little bit different. Unlike all the other times she had seen them, his hair was a bit shaggy around the edges. Even without seeing his dark green eyes, she knew he watched everything around them. Nothing ever escaped his notice. It was impossible for him, she knew. It had been drummed into him by the core. They both were still in good shape. Sculpted muscles, lean bodies. When she realized she had been staring at them, she glanced away and pulled her brain cells back together. "So, in exchange for your continued protection, I'm to become your mistress?" Viola smiled in spite of herself. Lord Leonidas had certainly found an original way of framing his proposal. Her savior shook his head, mad eyes dancing beneath long lashes. "No. In exchange for both continued physical protection and my letting it be known in certain quarters that you are under such, you'll become my lover. The term you choose makes no difference, my lord. The end result is the same." "Oh no, Mrs. Whedon. It's not the same thing at all." Viola let out an unsteady breath. She wanted this man, much as she hated to admit it. "No?" Her voice came out embarrassingly weak, almost breathy. "No." Lord Leonidas smiled and abandoned his post by the cold grate to claim the chair across from her. "A lover, Mrs. Whedon, puts his partner's pleasure first, or rather, her pleasure is his pleasure." Her mouth watered, forcing her to swallow. One corner of his mouth kicked up as though he knew. "When has your pleasure ever been the first and most important concern of either person in your bed?" Her eyes snapped up, riveted to him. "Never. Men paid for their pleasure to be the only concern. That was the whole point. Whether wife or mistress, a woman's pleasure was of little import." Running out of the ship was like charging into a sauna. The heat was a physical barrier that made everything harder, even breathing. They were almost to the others when a figure walked out of the smoke, her body armor shredded in places, and her blonde hair dark with soot. Nyx. She was carrying Arya, who hung as limp as a rag doll in the cyborg's arms. Eric yelled her name and sprinted to her. The others cried out in relief and concern. But Bobby would remember Chris's voice later. He uttered a strangled sound of grief and loss that lasted only a few seconds. At first, she didn't understand his reaction. Then, she saw Arya's legs. One hung at an odd angle. The other was wrong. Flattened and twisted. Her boot gone. The foot a bloody mess of flesh and bone. Oh no. Kurt appeared at her side, physically turning her away from the terrible scene. He pointed her toward Trinity and the others, and then sent her off with a light push. She hurried over to them with the first aid kit. This was something she could do. She checked them for concussions, treated their scrapes and contusions, and did her best to keep everyone's spirits up. None of them said anything about Arya. Bobby had offered to donate blood, thinking her medibots might help, but Dax had shaken his head. Arya hadn't agreed to take the treatment yet, and he didn't want to force that decision on her.